Did God lie to Adam when he told him, the day that you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you'll surely die? The answer is no, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. The answers that I have seen to that question depend on how you answer another question. And it's a bigger question, and that is, why don't Adam and Eve die when they eat the fruit? Now, I've seen this interpreted as a spiritual death or the death of their innocence, and sure, but let's stick with what the story says for now, because the story in Genesis doesn't actually say these things. We're going to go with an actual physical bodily death. God says, day you eat of it, you're going to die. Why don't they die? The two answers given to this are that God was full of crap and they did die. They just didn't die right away. And God didn't mean it literally when he said that you'll die the day that you eat of it. The conclusion you come to depends on how you approach the text, and each conclusion raises problems. If you come to the conclusion that God was telling the truth, you see that they did eventually die. God said that when you eat of it, you'll die. And after they ate of it, he kicked them out of the garden because they ate of it, so they wouldn't live forever. Therefore, they died. So, because God doomed them to death instead of them dying right away, then what he meant must have been you'll be doomed to death, not necessarily that you'll die right away, because that's what actually happened. The other approach that leads to the conclusion that God wasn't telling the truth is if you take that phrase, the day you eat of it, you'll surely die, at face value, and then take that meaning and read that into the rest of the story. You said that they'll die the day they eat of it. They didn't die. Therefore, why did you lie? The problem raised by this interpretation is that phrase, the day you eat of it, you'll surely die. Because again, taken at face value, it doesn't mean doomed to death. Now, I understand it can be and has been argued that it can mean that, but I'm trying to steel man this here. So for now, we're going to go with it doesn't mean that. And that's the problem raised by it. You're kind of reading that into that phrase. The problem raised by this approach is, in my opinion, a lot bigger because it doesn't actually answer the question of why Adam and Eve don't die that day. Because if he says the day that you eat of it, you'll surely die, and they don't die, why doesn't he kill them? He doesn't say that you will die instantly. He says you'll die that day. And he doesn't say they'll die from eating the fruit. He just says they'll die. So why doesn't God kill them that day? He had the power to do it. He had the right to do it. So if you take the approach that God lied, it's that God made himself a liar in that moment by not killing them. No matter who you are or what approach you take, every answer you give is going to be something that is not in the text. You could say that God changed his mind, or that he was showing mercy, or that he came up with the punishment on the fly. Whatever you say, none of that's actually in the text. And on top of that, all of these explanations do a really bad job of explaining the fact that they did actually die. God did doom them to death that day. In fact, let's look at the verse. The Lord God said, since man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil, he must not reach out, take from the tree of life, and eat, and live forever. So God told them, the day that you eat of it, you will die, and goes on to say, they ate of it, now they have to die. So taking that literal approach puts it in the position that God said, if you eat of it, you're going to die that day. And then he says, you ate of it, but you're going to die. Just not today, just later down the road. So he threatens to punish them with death, and then he punishes them with death. He just puts time in between it, and there's no explanation as to why this is. So going back to what I said before, both approaches raise problems. If you don't take that phrase literally, it raises the problem of really just you not taking it literally. You are assuming another meaning, but you are assuming this based on the rest of the story. The other approach takes the phrase at face value, so you're not reading anything into it, but then you're creating a whole ton of ambiguity, and it causes you to read things into the rest of the story instead of that phrase, like the fact, like you're saying that God was trying to deceive them, or that God lied to them. It raises the question of why didn't God kill them? Why didn't they die right away? It just creates all this gray area that doesn't need to be there. So, arguably, the literal approach makes more sense philologically, but the other approach makes more sense in every other way. So, if you've stuck around with me for 5 whole minutes, thank you. People don't normally watch these longer videos, but that's been burning a hole in my brain for the last couple of days, and I needed to get it off my chest so I could move on with my life. So, there you go.